Hi, in this video we will see interpolation and property binding in Angular 20. So by the end of this video you will be able to add a property in your component TS file which can be bound into the HTML templates. So let's jump back into our VS Code. So let's start by creating a post list component. Because our application name is poster, we will create an application where we'll create posts or see and view all the posts related to the post created. Okay, so this is our code repository, and you will get the code repository in our description, the GitHub link for this repository in the description of the video. And up till now we'll only have an app component, okay, and a header component, okay, where we only see a poster logo. That's it. Okay, and in the header.ts file we don't have anything, right? We only have this header.html, and that's it. And that header is connected to the app.html component, the our root component, okay, the app dash header. And inside the app.ts file, that is being imported, right? Because we have to use that header component inside this app.html. So now we'll create our push list component. For that we'll go to the terminal, and I'll add a new terminal because our development server should be running. So I'll add a new terminal over here, and here I can create a post list component using the command ng generate and the component and the component name, right? Because I want to generate the component inside this components folder, so I can directly write the folder name components slash now our component name, right? So our component name would be post list. Okay, so when I press enter, this will create a post list component. Remember, you can also create a component using our ChatGPT or the Google GitHub Cloud. And this has already been explained to you in our earlier videos. So now we'll go to the post list component. Here our post list component is created, and inside this post list component, when we go to the postlist.html, we can see the post list work, the default text that is being added by the Angular CLI is shown over here. And inside the post list TS file we don't have anything else, right? So we'll start by creating a template property or a component property, you can say. So I'll now, this is a post list, right? So I'll create a post object, right? So post object should have a title and a content. So I'll add a post object. Now this post object will have an object with the properties title and content. So I'll accept this one. Now you can see the GitHub Copilot is suggesting me that it should have a title and the content. So I'll accept that with the completion of this object. So now our post object is created. Remember, this is not something related to the Angular or the TypeScript. This is basically pure JavaScript. So we have one object with a title and a content properties. Okay. So now let's see how this is looking in our browser. So in the browser, you can't see anything except the header, right? That's because we have only created a post object, and that post object is not bound into our HTML, or is not added into our HTML template. So let's go in our post list.html and bind our these properties in our post list.html file. So this is our post list.html. Now we'll remove the default text, the default paragraph. Okay, so we'll create a div for that. Okay, and now you can see the GitHub Copilot is auto suggesting me everything that I should have a post list header along with a div class with post. So I'll accept that, but I'll not add the another post or yet another post. Only bind our object, right? So to bind our object, we'll use this interpolation, right? So this is called as interpolation, where you can use the expression inside that, or you can use the properties that you have added in your component ts file, right? For example, I can also add an expression over here. So let's say I can use 1 plus 1, so this will show 2 inside the browser. So the interpolation is always added, or is added to you show the expression or show the component content or the component property templates contents. Okay, so here we have the post object, right? Because we have the post object, that is an object. So in order to show the title, we'll show the post object dot title, right, in the s2 tag. Now with the paragraph tag, okay, or the paragraph element, we'll see the post object dot content. So the paragraph tag, the post object dot content, should be shown into the browser. So let's see how this is working inside the browser. Now that we have added the post object dot title and post object dot content inside this post list dot html, if you go into the browser, we still can't see anything inside the browser, right? We still can't see the title of the post object or the title or the content of the post object, right? Why? Because we have only created a post list component. We have not added it into our the app.html file, because app.html file is the only file that is being shown into the browser for now, right? And within that app.html file, we are only showing up the app dash header, right? So that's why only header is being shown into the browser. So now let's add the selector of our post list component. So I'll type the app dash post list, right? So here the post list is being added in the imports array of this component ts file. So if you go to the app.ts file, you can see we are getting the error because the imports has been added, but those are not saved, right? So the post list import is added inside this app.ts file, but this is not yet saved. So once I save this file, you can see the errors are gone. Now if you go into the browser and see, you can see the post list is being shown inside this the h1 tag, and we also have the sample post along with that. This is a sample post content, right? The title and the content of the post. Okay, so that's how you can bind your properties or bind your any methods or properties inside this uh, the template html file from the ts file, or from the component file that you have added, or all the properties that you have added inside your component ts file, right? So once we have added this post list or post list component, I'll remove the first of all the h1 tag because we don't need it. This is already a poster component, so we don't need the post list tag. Okay, so we'll also add some class because the post class is already added. So if I go to the postly.scss file, we'll add the post class over there with some css files or some css rules inside this postlist.scss file. So I'll go to the postlist.scss file. I'll paste the code or the snippet for this css class. You can get this code inside our YouTube video description. And once we have added this css class, so this css class is being added into the div class, into this div. So if you go to the browser and see how this works, so you can see some nice styling has been added as a card for our the title and the content within that. Okay, so now that we have added the css class for that, our main idea was to add the interpolation, right? So remember, we can also change this interpolation. For example, if you don't want to have double curly braces for that, you can change that. I have made a separate video for that where you can change that the interpolation based on your preference. That is basically added from the component decorator metadata. Okay, within that we have the interpolation property, and that can be changed from there. Okay, or I'll prefer with these double curly braces for the interpolation. So now that our properties are bound inside this postly.html from the postlist.ts file, the component file from the template, right? So now we'll see how the property binding works. Now in the property binding, we will let's say I have the post object wherein I want to add a image for this post. So let's say I'll add image as a URL for that image. Okay, let's say I have this URL where I have the pixum URL where this will generate a random image which is by 200 by 200 pixels. Okay, so the image is created. Now I want to add this image inside our postlist.html. Okay, so I'll create one image tag over here. So image. Okay, and then I'll close that. Okay, now I'll add the src, but now the src should not be static URL, that but that should be coming from the postlist.ts file. Okay, so how can we do that? Let's first do that, do with the static URL. So I'll add the alt text over here. Okay, so this should be post image. Okay, now we have the alt text. Let's see how this is working in our the browser. So we have this random image coming from the pixum URL. Okay, so first of all, let me just align this a bit over here on the right. So I'll add the the flex property for this post component. Okay, the post class. So I'll just add uh, display with flex. Okay, so now we have the post over here, and I'll add justify content with space between. Okay, and now the gap will be 1 rem. Okay, so now we have this the flex added over here, so that this should align a bit properly nicely on this card. So I'll just paste that, copy that post class css that we just added in the browser and paste it over here. Okay, so we have this display and justify content along with the gap. So for that we also will have a div over here, so that the title and content should be aligned as it was earlier. So this will be a div, and within that we'll have this image. Okay, so now you can see the title and content is there along with our image that is aligned to the right. Okay, so now this image is a random image that is coming from the pixel URL. Now you can see another image coming up whenever I refresh this screen. Okay, so now this is the static URL, but now we want to have that the URL that should be coming from the post object. Okay, so how will you do this? We will do this. You do this using this property binding. Okay, so the property that is property binding itself says that whatever properties you have inside your TypeScript file, that can be bound into your the HTML file. Okay, the post list.html over here. So to bind a property into your post list.html from the post list.ts, that is the component, into the template part. So we'll have the square bracket. Okay, over the property where you want to bind your properties from coming from the component file. Okay, so we have this src. Now this needs a dynamic object or dynamic value. So dynamic value, that means the post object that we have along with our image. Okay, so now this will bind this post object dot image with this src element. Remember, this is the default, the HTML element, the HTML image element, we can say. So you can see over here. So this HTML image elements has this attribute, which is the src. Okay, or now this src attribute can be bound using the dynamic value. Okay, this dynamic value is coming from the post object. Okay, now if I refresh the screen, and you can see we still see the image over here, right? We still see the title, the content along with the image. Okay, so that's how I think the property bindings are, and that's how you can bind your the component properties into the template. Remember, you can also do this with a button. For example, if you have a button in your form, let's say I have a button. Okay, but I want to disable this button or I want to enable this button until certain conditions are met, right? So you can also use the inbuilt the properties of this HTML element. Let's say that is the attribute disabled. Okay, so Angular provides this inbuilt functionality where you can use these inbuilt attributes along with the properties that you have inside your template or inside your component ts file. Okay, so the disabled, you can see whenever our conditions meet. For example, I'm adding a condition is that is form valid. Okay, so that means whenever my is form valid or is form invalid should be there. Okay, whenever my form is invalid, then this button should be disabled. Okay, so that's how we can do property bindings with the HTML default elements along with the default attributes or the default properties that are coming from the HTML DOM elements. Okay, so until now we have added the property bindings to the HTML elements, but the properties can also be bound to the component elements as well. For example, let's say I'll remove this button over here. So we are using the post list inside this app.html, right? Now let's say post list had some inputs, right? So let's say we have some inputs over here. So that input can be added over here. So whatever input we pass from here, whenever you are using that selector of the post list, whatever input we pass from here, let's say I'm passing an input, let's say um, show list. Okay, so this will dynamically show the list over here. So if I pass anything from here, let's say true or false, then that value or that value will be assigned to this to this input that we have added. So we'll see more on these inputs and outputs of the components in our upcoming lectures. For now, let's see. Let's just assume that we have this input over here. Okay, and that input can be bound or that property can be bound whenever you are using any component as well. Okay, not just the HTML elements. Let's say we are using the HTML elements over here, not just the elements, but along with the component elements can also be added, and the properties can be bound to the component elements or selectors as well. Okay, one last thing to remember is that whenever you are using any property or whenever you are creating any property inside your component class, okay, so that should be a signal. For example, if that is always or that is frequently changing. For example, let's say I have a property, let's say fetching data. Okay, FET, fetching data. Okay, now the fetching data should be will be made as true whenever we are fetching any data from the backend. Okay, and can be made as false whenever we receive the backend data or we received any error from the backend. Okay, so here this fetching data is changing frequently, right? So you should always use a signal from here. Okay, so for example, let's say I'm using fetching data over here, and we should always use a signal for that. Okay, so this is our signal syntax for signal. So it should have an initial value. So initially the fetching data should be false. Okay, though, so whenever you have any property that is changing frequently inside your class, inside your the component, then you should always use signal for that, because signal provides better reactivity and it directly updates the DOM without needing of the chain detection, because that is automatically triggered whenever you change any signal values. Okay, so you should always use signals over here. But if your property is static, right, if your property is not changing frequently, you should avoid using signals for that property. Okay, so we'll be seeing signals, more on signals in our upcoming lectures. And one more thing that we can add over here is that we can also use the interpolation along with the properties. For example, let's say I have this image src tag where we have this alt tag. Okay, inside this alt tag I can also use the interpolation and use a dynamic value over here. Okay, let's say I want to add post object dot title. Okay, so what this will do is that this will create all text with this value. Okay, so this post object dot title will be appended along with the post dash. Okay, and that all text will be added. So you can also use this interpolation along with this the attributes or the properties of the HTML elements. Okay, so that was all about the interpolations and the property bindings. So if you found this video helpful, you can click on the like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.